What's up, bookworms? So I read 39 books in 2025, four of which were nonfiction. And today I'm going to talk about those four books. Now, all four of these books were 10 out of 10s on my scale. And the first nonfiction book that I read in 2025 was The Last Outlaws by Tom Clavin. I read this book in March, and it's the history of the Dalton Gang. Now, this book is really, really good, you guys, and it has a lot of really good history about the Dalton Gang, a few of the other gangs like the James Younger Gang, and the history of the Midwest and a lot of the area that the Dalton Gang roamed. So, like I said, definitely that 10 out of 10. Highly recommend, especially if you love the history of outlaw gangs, the American history, or the history of the Midwest. The second nonfiction book that I read last year was The Silk Roads by Peter Frankopan. Now, I read this book in April of 2025, and it's the history of how trade developed the world. Now, this book had a lot of really good world history in it and had a lot of really good details and the histories of a lot of the religious wars that tore throughout the Middle East. And so this book actually changed my perspective of how the United States is operating in the Middle East right now because it goes into really great detail on what got the United States involved in the Middle East to begin with. And so this book has a lot of really good history and a lot of good information. Highly recommend this book if you love world history or United States history. The third book I read was Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. And I also read this book in April of 2025. And it's the history of tuberculosis and how it developed the world. And now this book has a lot of really good anecdotes on tuberculosis and all the famous people that were affected by this disease, also known as the wasting disease. And so it's got a lot of really good world history and history throughout the United States on it. I absolutely love John Green's writing style and what he brings to the table as a nonfiction author. And I just recently listened to part of his book, The Anthropocene Reviewed. My wife was listening to it as an audiobook, and he has a lot of really good anecdotes in that book as well. So, highly recommend John Green, especially if you love history and American history. And the final nonfiction book that I read in 2025 was The Men Who United States by Simon Winchester. And I read this book in November of 2025. And it's the history of the men who brought the United States together. And it had a lot of good history on the surveyors, the traders, the railroad barons, a lot of the different people that were sent out to map the United States and how that brought the world together. And this book was really, really good. It had a lot of information on all the different resources that were needed and how we branched out in search of different resources like metals and oil and gas. And so this book was really, really good and one of my favorite books that I read in 2025. So, highly recommend The Men Who United the States by Simon Winchester, especially if you love American history. Like I said, this book was definitely top notch as far as American history books go. So that was the four books that I read in 2025 that were nonfiction. And like I said, all four of these books were definitely 10 out of 10s and highly recommended by me if that means anything to you guys. So in the meantime, bookworms, let's get out there and carpe some Librum.